All right, guys. This is episode 36. Yesterday was, or 2 days ago was Grippy. It was 35. That was our first Empire exclusive interview. Maybe we should have started with Adam, being that we're blood related. But we started with Grippy. We're going second with Adam. Adam was a multiple time Catholic state champ. He was a youth state champ, fourth in New York State his senior year, Eastern state champ, wrestles at Cornell, fifth or sixth at the IWAs, Adam. I forgot.
Next.
Sixth at the IWAs this past season. Been in and out of the lineup for them for the last 2 or 3 years. Hopefully this year he'll be the full-time guy and looking to be an All-American and national champ. And we're really excited to watch that. So Adam, just how we start every interview, and I know the answer to most of these things, but we're going to ask you anyways. How did you get into wrestling?
Yeah. So I started in 5th grade, and I hadn't really played any other sports before, maybe like t-ball or something like that. So I don't really know how the conversation went exactly, but it was between your dad and my dad, and just about getting me started up with wrestling. So, and then Valhalla, where I'm from, didn't really have any type of program. So right away I got through in with Deagle and those guys in Millwood. And it was an interesting experience for somebody who really didn't know anything about wrestling at the time. You know, even though you were at Hofstra wrestling, you know, that's all I knew. It was literally like those words, like cousin Anthony wrestles at Hofstra. I didn't know anything about wrestling. If you asked me about wrestling, I probably would have told you something about like John Cena. But yeah, so right away I got threw in the fire with Deagle and Iowa style guys over in Millwood.
Did I ever tell you the story about when I first learned that Adam was wrestling? I think I might have. No? So I'll let you in. And so Adam, I think I made fun of him for this story, but my dad called me and he's like, Adam's wrestling. I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe he told me that a couple of weeks or months before I actually saw Adam wrestling. And then one day he's like, hey, what are you doing today? It was like the preseason at Hofstra. We didn't have to be there or whatever. I'm like, nothing. He's like, why don't you come down to the club? Adam will be at practice. I said, okay, cool. So I went to the club and, you know, us on this podcast, on this big podcast that rivals Joe Rogan, we don't mind obese people. Hey, live your life, you know, live your life. But Adam might have been a little bit packing on the pounds for a little guy. He was a little chubby little guy. And he was at the end of practice and they were trying to get him to climb a rope. And there was no chance. Like, it just wasn't happening. And tears were streaming down his eyes. He was so upset. And I remember looking at my dad, and, you know, I loved Adam. It wasn't really anything like that. But I remember looking at my dad and saying, I don't know if this is for him, you know. and, you know, 10, 15 years down the road, you know, this guy's a D1 superstar. We wrestled like 2 weeks ago, and he beat the crap out of me. So it's kind of crazy, you know, the trajectory. But, you know, that's why I was so – there's 2 reasons I was very excited to interview Adam. One is because you're my cousin, you're successful. But 2, I think a lot of kids can relate to you because it wasn't always easy. Like, he figured it out. Like, he had to really bust his butt to get to where he is. Coach DeBellis, to get you in here a little bit, do you remember when you first met Adam? Because he was a lot to do with Greeley for a while.
Yeah, I think it was the youth practices at Greeley, and you used to bring them, you know, with all of our youth.
I believe he definitely came a lot. We would probably work out during youth practice, but he wrestled modified with us, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think 7th and 8th grade.
Yeah. So we had Adam with us on the modified, coach, for 2 years.
Was he in the same group as like Aaron, and they were older. He was older, yeah.
I don't know who would be with that group. Maybe
during those years, modified had like 7 or 8 guys, but they were all studs.
Yeah, we were tough.
Like Aaron, Matthew, Jacob, Nathan.
Adam won a youth state title with us. So it was 8th grade year, right?
Huh?
Your 8th grade year, you won youth states, right?
Yeah.
So he did that. But so Adam, let's go back to you for a second. So you started as like, what grade were you in? 2nd or 3rd grade? I don't remember.
With
Wrestling.
Oh, like 5th grade.
Oh, 5th grade. I thought it was earlier for me. So you start wrestling in the 5th grade. You're at the club. My dad's probably there. Sometimes your dad's taking you. You met John. And you're in there with the crew with like Steven Rodriguez and all those guys. Because I remember A-Rod talking about you when you first got there. Mm-hmm. When you first walked in that room and you saw the level of wrestling in there, did it discourage you, or are you more like, I want to be like those guys? Was that like, what was your first couple of thoughts as a young kid when you saw that?
Yeah. So like I said, like I didn't really like know anything about wrestling. But, you know, coming up to this podcast, I was thinking about some of the first practices at Deagle's. And I didn't really like realize what was going on around me, to be honest. I knew that like looking back on it now, like Steven and Brian and Justice Flamio and Lindsay and all those guys were in there, scrapping. And I think even at the time, like there wasn't even like a youth practice and a high school practice or an elite practice. I think everybody just went at once. So yeah, that I didn't even know. It's actually kind of funny too, because like the first couple practices, we were wrestling and we were drilling and whatnot. And then whoever I was going with, like John stopped it and he was like, all right, battle stations, like we're going live. And I like looked around, I was like live? Like, what do you mean live? Like we were just wrestling before. Like, what's the difference? Like, we're going to go live, like live on TV? Like what? And, I learned shortly after that what live wrestling was. Cause I mean, like I said, like there was no like youth practice or anything. Like you were just thrown in there right away and a little bit. And it was discouraging, but I don't know. I grew to love it.
Yeah, I mean, and Coach, I'll let you jump in on here a little bit too, but we both know Adam very well, obviously, and as he went on, he progressed really quick. But what kept you engaged? Because in the beginning, it wasn't easy, and like you said, those names that you were listing, like the Stevens, the Justice, they were hammers. They were really, really, really tough. And something I remember about you, Adam, is you were always around. So I feel like you always, like all the good guys were there. You were the young guy that was kind of tagging along with them. Like you were always with that group, even when you weren't at their level yet, right? And I think just kind of maybe taking beating after beating or just being around them and being a student of them kind of rubbed off on you and eventually just started clicking, right? How did you keep yourself positive through the beginning years where it was just not that easy? Like, was there something that like helped you kind of, learn, like you said, you learned to love it. What made you learn to love it?
Yeah. So honestly, in those first couple of years, I definitely remember wanting to quit and not do it anymore. It was too hard, too stressful. I didn't want to come to practice. But I guess I don't really know like a distinct time, but yeah, like you said, like just like watching all those guys become successful and whatnot. And I myself, I think what it was, I lost a little bit of that weight, and then got a little bit better at wrestling, kind of like noticed those gains. And I think that's what started like driving me to continue. And I think honestly, by like my 7th and 8th grade year of middle school, I was pretty obsessed with wrestling. And, that at that point was when I started, coming to practice all year, summer, fall, spring. It's all I did from then on throughout high school.
How did you feel having Coach Santoro as your cousin and, that resource? Was that helpful throughout your career?
Yeah, definitely. It was good because, I think you should have a bond like that with your coach, where they should be your friend and your buddy, but they should also, be able to tell you when you're messing up and, get to beat on you a little bit, So I think that you get the best of both worlds. And then, that's also what we have up here at Cornell. We have, great coaches who are, they seem like our friends. And then at the same time, they're our coach. So that's how it should be. And that's how I feel with you, with Deagle, all of my coaches. So I'm really grateful.
I think I'm going to add in there too, though. I think there's a bit of a double-edged sword there, at the same time, because I was probably way harder on Adam than I probably was with a lot of the other guys that came through because he was my family, so I treated it a little bit differently. But I knew as like a 7th grader, 8th grader that he was going to be good, that he was going to start making that jump because like he said, he kind of fell in love with it and he knew about like college wrestling at that point. He was watching matches. He was a student of the game. And at that point, I'm like, this guy likes this. And when you learn to like a sport like wrestling, that's super difficult. I feel like you could jump levels really quick, right? When you're getting forced to go there and you're not really feeling it and you're doing it for outside reasons, it's hard to be successful. But Adam started to really like it and he got better very quick. Coach DeBellis, we kind of missed one on this because, we've had a couple of guys, and I won't name their names right now, that were going to come transfer to Greeley. They're going to do all these things. But Adam was really the one that very well should have been wrestling at Greeley. And it was actually very close to happening. But But technically, he ended up pretty much being a Greeley guy anyways, in a sense. You know, at States, I was in the corner for most years, and he was at a lot of our practices and stuff like that. I remember, Adam, one of your first big high school wins that I think you were put onto the map. That's I'll say mine after. I'm curious if you have on top of your head, what match, like, did you realize, to forget you'd state championship, that's really good, you knew you were good, but what high school match was like, hey, I'm here? Do you remember one that like kind of stands out?
Yeah, when I beat Ben Etlinger at Shoreline. Is that what you were thinking?
100%.
Yeah.
Ninth grade, right?
Mm-hmm.
So before you even say the story, I'll let you tell the whole story of the match, Adam. And I thought it was funny when Grippy brought up Shoreline the other day to us, Coach, because I'm like, you know, we're going to interview Adam this weekend also. And in my head, I'm like, Adam's big come out party was Shoreline also. And he won Shoreline as a freshman. And I like every kid I coach. You know, I try my hardest to see the best in them. They're kids, you know, so I'm going to work my butt off for them. But Ben was a jerk. Like, he was a bully. He wasn't very nice to a lot of the kids. He really was that person. You know, now as a grown adult, I hope he's a great person. I have no idea. I don't talk to him. But he was a bully. And Adam was a freshman. I believe he was a junior, if I'm correct on that. And he thought he was going to smoke Adam. He thought it was like a done deal. And Adam, I think it was overtime. So you tell us about the whole sequence. Go ahead, Adam. Get in there. Tell us.
So Ben Etlinger wrestled for Fox Lane. I think he was a junior when I was a freshman. We wrestled at 126 in the Shoreline finals. I don't know who I wrestled before that, if I had any really like close matches.
It was another big match, but not to that level. I remember you being somebody pretty good, but
yeah. Maybe a kid from like Warwick Valley or something. But yeah, so like Ben also was an Empire guy, then Iowa style. And there was definitely a couple practices where he had, you know, put it on me when I was in middle school and whatnot, and, you know, bullied me and got me frustrated, and, you know, which is good. Like, you're always going to have those kind of guys in the room. So yeah, Ben, he'd always had beat me up, whatever. And then my freshman year, I don't think we had wrestled too much leading up to then. Maybe like sometime during the fall, and then there was kind of like a long break in there when we didn't wrestle, because we did wrestle kind of often. And I don't know if I beat him. I don't think it was overtime. I think I just beat him by one takedown, like in the last minute or something like that. But yeah, I just remember the match going on. I always remember Ben being strong in practice and whatnot. And I remember in the match he felt strong too, but I don't think it was a very high scoring match. I think I just stayed in good position, and he took a crappy shot at the end, and I just sprawled and went behind. And
Coach, I don't think people realize that are watching these, that how big of a deal I feel like that is when you were a fifth. Like, you know, I started wrestling as a third grader. I started pretty young, and I was a scrappy kid right off the bat. Like, you know, skill wise, I had a hard time getting moves. And we'll get into it a little bit more later, Adam's very intelligent and he picks up stuff very quick, and his wrestling IQ is super high. But as a fifth grader, you know, he wasn't in that type of shape. He didn't have that killer instinct. To make that jump in 4 years to win a tournament like Shoreline is a big friggin' jump, you know, and I think that talks about the hours that he put in. Coach, what would you say about that trajectory from like he was bad, like he was really, really bad, and like he went from really, really bad to Shoreline champ in a pretty quick time. And that's why I really hope that our guys watch this, because a lot of our guys are new to the game. You know, they can make those kind of jumps if they do what Adam did.
Yeah, I think doing what you did in 4 years to become, first of all, Shoreline tournament is one of the hardest tournaments around.
Yeah.
And to win it as a freshman is very difficult to do, especially at 126 pounds. You know, you're up there with the sophomores and the juniors.
Yeah.
And you see yourself in the finals against a kid that beats you all the time, and somehow mentally you figured out how to win. And that's the most important thing. Figuring out how to win. You can beat anybody, but you got to figure out how to get them. Mm-hmm. And you did. Did you ever wrestle him again after that?
Yeah, maybe a little bit at practice.
Never in competition.
I remember he placed at States his senior year, and I think it was at like 138. And I'm assuming he was going to John's. I don't think he went anywhere else.
And you were a 32-pounder though that year, I believe, right? You were a little.
Sophomore year, I was 132.
And what year, Adam? Just to refresh my memory, what year did you dislocate your elbow?
That was my junior year. right at the beginning of my junior year when I wrestled
So,
145.
so to tell these guys too, and another thing, right? Like we always talk about like being injured and being hurt, right? I think a dislocated elbow is being injured. Hurt, I hurt my wrist yesterday wrestling with Chris Perry and I feel a little sore. Like I'm fine though, right? Injured, something that you really can't come back from. And I think that also says something from that 5th grader that was crying and couldn't climb a rope to an 11th grader that dislocates his elbow, still wins the Catholic States, still goes on the States with an elbow brace on. Tell me, how did you develop that mentality? Like how that change happened? Like what happened with you there that made you into that person?
So just like looking back on that year, I remember, so I dislocated my elbow. I started the year wrestling 152. And I remember that year also at Super 32 earlier in like October, I also wrestled 152. And at some point in the wrestlebacks, I wrestled a kid from Monsignor Farrell, who was also another Catholic school in Staten Island. And he beat me. And I was pretty disappointed in myself. I took the loss really bad. I just, thought to myself like, oh, this kid's in my section. He just beat me. Like I'm terrible. This year is a bust already, and it's October. It hasn't even started. But so then, yeah, I went on to dislocate my elbow at the North Rockland tournament, and then I remember going to Eastern States, like not wrestling, just to watch, and just like watching everybody and watching Shoreline and whatnot. And it just made me really hungry. And I think I had planned to go 52 that whole year. And I wasn't really a 52 pounder. And at that point, after watching like Shoreline and Eastern States, it just made me really hungry. Like seeing all my friends win, Grippy, whoever else was in there. I was like, all right, I got to go down to 145 and start beating some kids up. So my elbow got better, and then came the end of the year and postseason. I really just made it back like right for the postseason. And then so we had Catholic Cities first, and I wrestled not the same kid from Farrell. He was still at 52, but a different kid from Farrell at 145 who had won Catholic States maybe twice before. So he was pretty good. But I whooped him. I beat him like 14-2, and it felt great. And then the next weekend at Catholic States, I teched him in the finals. So
you were pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I was pretty excited about that. Yeah.
Something I wanted to ask you about, because we'll get into later, because you changed. And I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. I think for you at the time, it was a good thing, but then ends up changing into, you end up maturing. But again, I'm going back to that 5th grader, right? When we had Grippy on here, that guy was a stud right off the bat. He had older brothers that were superstars. Like he came in, he was ready to go. It was a process. When you got good and you would take a loss, you took them very hard, right? You cared a lot, and maybe almost too much. But I could tell you 2 funny stories off the top of my head, and I feel like that's what this podcast is about, getting these stories out there. Coach Sabellis, you might have heard these, but if you didn't, you will get a kick out of both of them. One of them, we were at the Mohawk Valley tournament, which was an off-season freestyle tournament, and I'm just coaching, right? And Adam's the last match, or the second to last match. He's in the finals, beating the kid, ends up somehow losing. He wrestled fine, but he lost the close match, whatever. Adam he listened, right? He did his cool down like he's supposed to do, and he did everything he was supposed to do, but he was very fiery when he took a loss. So this kid, David Ortiz, Coach Sabellis, you remember David Ortiz?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, so yeah.
David had a very strong Spanish accent. I think he was born in Puerto Rico, I believe. And so David comes up to me, and you got to picture, like it makes the story a little better if you picture him saying it to me that way, right? And he comes up to me, he's like, Coach. I'm like, what's up? He goes, I was like, guys, get ready, we're leaving. He's like, Adam, he's laying in the mud. I go, what are you talking about? So I go outside, and Adam's like back down, laying in the dirt. But he just finished his cool down, right? So he just laid down, and he was just tired. But I'm not going to just let that go like that, right? So the whole car ride back, I kept saying, Adam, there's a mound of dirt over there. Do you want me to pull over so you can roll around in the dirt and cry like a baby because you lost? And he's like, stop it. Leave me alone. So that was one very funny story that happened. I'll let you defend both of these, Adam, in a second. The second one, and you were at this one, DeBellis. Remember my first tournament out of retirement when I wrestled in that freestyle tournament?
Mm-hmm.
What was that? Northeast Regionals, I believe. So that was Northeast Regionals. I tore my meniscus in my 3rd match. But Adam, of course, has to be a jerk. What's that, Coach? I mean, Adam.
No. Lily just walked in.
There, did you wrestle Bo Jordan, or was he in your weight?
He was in my bracket. We didn't wrestle though. So I tear my meniscus in my second match actually, and I still wrestled my third anyways. I lost to some West Point kid 10-9. I'll never forget. And Adam had to be a jerk and do well in the tournament. So that tournament was crowded. So I was done at like 2. Adam's last match, his finals match was until like 8 p.m. And my my knee was the size of like a volleyball at this point. And Adam's wrestling, he's in the finals, and at the break, it's freestyle. And at the break, he's up like 9-zip. He's wrestling great. I'm like, all right, at least he's gonna tight this kid. He's gonna win a championship. Awesome. Somehow, some way, he gets caught in like a trap arm or something. He ends up getting tacked, like 20-10 or something like that. Some crazy match. So Adam went to go do his cool down. I'm in a lot of pain. And I'm like, all right, we got to get out. I'm telling my dad, I'm like, we got to leave. Adam's doing a fit in the back. And I remember just grabbing him by the arm, like, we're leaving. Let's go. We're leaving right now. And I had to like walk him off the ledge. So those are my 2 funny stories. But you could talk about those stories, Adam, or you could tell us how you kind of matured from that guy to senior year. You took some tough losses, but you handled it like a man. What changed maybe? And you could touch on those stories if you want.
Yeah, I mean, that's always I've always worked very hard or felt like I worked very hard. And, I think everybody takes losses personally, and that's just something I always had to work on it in high school, middle school, and even now sometimes, whether it be in practice, like you can't let getting frustrated get to you. You can't let, losing a match get to you in a tournament. You got to, be able to keep your composure. But I think everybody's thrown their fair share of hissy fits. But yeah, where was I going with this? At Northeast, I think in Northeast Regionals, I just ran to the back and started punching lockers or something like that. Anthony hobbles back, and I see him out of the corner of my eye, and I'm like, I'm gonna do my thing.
Yeah. Oh my God. But what changed though? Because I know you as a college wrestler, you've taken and not to, I want Coach to jump in here a little too, is that you wrestled a guy like Quincy Monday this year, who was a top 5 guy in the country, and you almost beat him. You wrestled a great match. But I saw how you took the match. You handled it. You got off the mat, you shook his hand, you did your thing. At States, and we'll get into that a little bit later, your semifinals was very controversial, I believe, and you handled it as tough as you probably could have.
I think
you were able to do it. Did something change your mind, or you think that was just kind of maturity?
I think it's maturity, and I think it's also just like about how you compete. Like if you feel 100% confident that you left everything out on the mat, then there's really not much you can be upset about. Like you're kind of convincing yourself that, okay, like he was better than me, like I need to go work on this. But and everybody makes mistakes in matches. You're not going to wrestle a perfect match ever, but I think it's just being able to understand that, and also not really just like focusing on winning or losing. You tend to get like much more emotional about winning or losing when that's all you're focused on in your matches. So like to talk about like States, like I wrestled that kid I lost to in the semis at Eastern States. I beat him like 14-7. Something crazy, like high scoring like that. And then at States, like I kind of like clammed up a little bit, lost to him 2-1, like
on a flea in the mat call.
On a flea in the mat call, yeah. So I do think I could have wrestled better there. Maybe he knew how I was after that, game plan a little bit, but yeah, I think it just comes down to like if you're 100% confident with what you leave on the mat, and like I see how all these guys up here handle that. I mean, the Deans especially, they they go 110% every match, and if they lose a match, they know what their mistakes are, but they're not too pressed about it. They know they wrestled really hard, and like a guy like Yanni is a little bit different. He gets really technical about that stuff. He's like, oh, if I just did this, like I would have won the match, like. But nobody really gets like too emotional, and I think that's just part of leaving your emotions out of it. I think it's just better if you just make it business and don't.
I don't want to get too much into the Cornell guys, even though we can make a whole other podcast about the people that he's around. But for the people that are listening, hopefully that we get a lot of listeners still. The Deans that he's talking about, one's an NCAA champ, the other's an NCAA runner-up. I think Gabe was a 2-time champion. Obviously, most of you guys know who Yanni is. Coach, I'm going to jump you into this here because I want your opinion on this. So we have some, like I say in every podcast, I love our kids. I love every kid that we've had from 2010 until now. Greeley's our baby. I love the club too. I put a lot into what I do, and as do you, and those kids are important. A thing that I notice is a lot of our kids, and this is going from years back and this year, a lot of them will show a lot of emotion sometimes after their losses, but what they do after they show that emotion is important to me. Now, the difference with Adam and other kids was, even though I didn't like maybe sometimes how upset he would get, he got that upset because he really did care that deeply, and he really did want to win, and he would come back that next day and practice and train with that same mentality that he left that match with, if that makes sense. Right now, a lot of our guys, they might be upset in that moment, but it seems like that thought kind of fleets out of their mind pretty quick the next day when they come back to practice. What do you have to say about that, Coach? You do see stuff like that as well? Like maybe there's a different level of wrestler, right? The guy that really bothers, and then you see it hit him on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're like, that bothered him, and then you see the guy that he acts like it bothered him, and maybe it did a bit in that moment, but Monday he forgot, and it's a different person.
Well, I always think to myself, do they have a real reason to be upset? Did they put the time in? Did they put the energy? Did they really commit to it prior to that match? Did they wrestle that match 100 times in their head? Did they train thinking about those moments?
That's a good point.
If they haven't, then, it's just an act. It's an act so that everybody knows that I really cared. But, a lot of times, they haven't done they haven't put the money in the bank to make those withdrawals. But if you invested all that time and all that energy into that time, then you have a legitimate reason to be upset. And the way you handle it, as you said, like Adam said in the beginning, he didn't know how to handle it. Now he realizes that he has to, go back to the drawing board and see, hey, how did he score on me? How did I score? And figure out what's the next step and how to wrestle your best match the next time out. And I like what you're saying about staying calm and, not being very emotional about it. Just it's all business. And I think that's what you guys learn more, through high school is a lot of pressure. That state title is important and Eastern state title. But when you get to college, you're wrestling some legit, everybody there was a state champ or a state runner-up or
good. Everybody's good.
Right.
I think that's a really good point, Coach.
Where you've gone.
Yeah, and I think Adam is a perfect example of somebody that really did put the money in the bank, right? So it's going to hit you a little differently.
Exactly.
I would
Those
see kids,
I feel for.
And then when you see a kid that, like I said, we care about these kids, but you see a kid that didn't take a shot the whole third period, and all of a sudden he has all this energy to throw a temper tantrum after he lost. It's like, where was that in the third period when you didn't take an attempt to win the match? I think that's something that Adam learned, at a young age, that he was fully committed. Like when he was running those sprints, I joked with him about him laying in the mud, but he was exhausted. He was exhausted on the ground. He had nothing left. He gave everything he had in the match. And we'll get a little bit more into it in a bit about how technical Adam was and how he was able to fix his, I'll get into it now real quick. We'll talk about Jacob Camacho texted me yesterday after he wrestled at Senior Nationals. He did a great job, and he wants to be interviewed next weekend, which is great. And Jacob's awesome. And something about Jacob that I always used to talk about, and I'm going to bring this into Adam, is Jacob Camacho made me a better wrestling coach, because when we would go over stuff, he would never disrespectfully question me, but he would be like, how would we do it this way? But now that I think back into it a little bit, the first guy that I've coached personally that was really like that was Adam. Because Adam was a technical, I don't want to use the word wizard, but he was very, he got it, right? He got it very good. He's smart. He's very smart. So, Adam was never disrespectful about it, but he was able to understand layers of wrestling. Adam, I want to ask you, what do you think made that, even as a high school guy, made that happen? Because maybe because you were a student of the sport, or like because you were able, we would go over maybe like an elbow control series, and you would have, layers to it. You would want to add to it. What made you become that guy?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to. So I mean, some guys have like their style of wrestling where they're very set and they do the same thing and they don't really like differentiate from it. And that's great because like consistency will, help you win matches. But I mean, part of like why I became obsessed with wrestling and why I still love wrestling is like learning new techniques and being able to score from anywhere and being able to score, a bunch of different ways, which also in its own right isn't the best thing, because if you're, wrestling a match and you don't really have like a plan of what you're going to hit, and you just kind of like, know you can score. I mean, that's good, but you want to be confident in certain things. But yeah, I just always wanted to like learn new ways to score and hit slick moves and stuff like that. So
that's a key. That's a key, because when you became that person, that's when you started becoming really good. Jay Camacho, when he became that person, he took his wrestling to another level. AJ, same thing. AJ was very much like that. Took his wrestling to another level. And me and Adam, like I said, we rolled around about a week or two ago. But before that, we wrestled like another 2 or 3 weeks before that. We wrestled one time up in Connecticut. And he showed me like a little add-on that Kyle Dake was showing him from like a wizard seatbelt position. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. I never would have thought about that. And Adam, being the same way as I was in that moment when Kyle showed it, he brought it to his next practice. He put it in his arsenal. And I think we need more wrestlers to kind of understand that, like, you could be good at something, and you should, like Adam's saying, you should kind of stick to what you're good at, but play with these other positions and figure it out. Wrestling's way more intricate than people think it is. And Adam's a key component of somebody like that. Even me and you, coach, right? Like, we'll see something and we'll kind of play with it. Like, I'll show a move at practice and you'll come up to me and say, hey, how about this? And we'll kind of move around a little bit. And it makes you think, because I feel like there's never 100% right answer. There could be a wrong answer, but there's never 100% right answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's something with the sport. But Adam, to get back to you real quick, a couple more questions that I really wanted to ask. We'll go into club wrestling a little bit.
Yeah.
I know for you, club wrestling was super important, and you definitely got a lot better with club wrestling. We don't really have to talk about all that, because we basically said, hey, you were a fifth grader, you weren't good, and you ended up being really good. And for people that are listening, he was always there. Adam did not miss practice. I can't remember a time that he missed practice. Is there any memories? We'll have a two-part question, because I asked Kirby the same questions. Something that stands out that was really fun, that was involved with the club. Doesn't have to be wrestling related, can be wrestling related. And the second question was a workout that you remember that was just brutal. Mm-hmm. So both of those two.
So I did watch the Grippy podcast, and I took those questions and tried to prepare off of them.
Smart Cornell guy.
Cornell, baby.
Cornell all day.
But to be honest,
Ian Frank had a list, remember?
Yeah, no, Greg was on another level.
Brown. We got all these Ivy Leaguers.
Yeah.
But to be honest, there's honestly too many funny stories and good times. I mean, during the winter was high school season, so we would come to practice, but nothing like crazy. I'm sure we joked around and whatnot. But during like the falls and the spring and the summers, like every weekend was either going to a tournament or going to a camp. And I made some really good memories and had a lot of fun doing them. I mean, honestly, part of the reason, or a lot of the reason I did those camps was because, Emmett, Camacho, Grippy, like all those guys were my best friends, still are my best friends. And I get to, take road trips and spend time with them and mess around. And it was a lot of fun. So I honestly can't answer that. I have too many funny stories. I do remember one time we went to the Oklahoma State camp in Albany, and I was with, I think I was younger, so like Sam Spino, Sam Malikian, those guys were on the trip, and I do remember just like hanging around with them, and they were a good amount older than me, so I was a little not uncomfortable, but like I was, I couldn't joke around with them like they would joke around with each other. I was just a little like high school freshman. But they went to PetSmart and bought a bunch of like goldfish and filled up John's tub and put the goldfish in there. So John was surprised when he got back to the room. So, I mean, that's just like an example of, something stupid that went on.
That's actually hysterical.
It was so much fun just like going and
I can picture his reaction.
Yeah.
You probably tried to eat the goldfish.
Put them on the radiator. Get a little cup of potatoes.
Oh my God. All right. How about a hard workout though? I want to hear that. Do you have anything for that?
I was trying to think back. So I do remember the one that Grippy was talking about with the ropes, where I don't know who was in my group, but we had to do we had to get a takedown and then do a rope, and we had to get that like 10 times. We couldn't get taken down, otherwise we had to like start over and maybe get one subtracted. But what I can say is that going to Empire really prepared me for college wrestling. Like we had, I mean, part of the reason I can't pick out a hard workout is because we had too many of them. You know, like there's just too many to choose from, and honestly, like it really prepared me for a Division I wrestling. I mean, when I came in, like it wasn't, you know, obviously the level of the room is different in a Division I room, but the kind of workouts that you put us through, that Deagle put us through, were on the same level. I mean, you know, hard, you know, hands-on drills, live wrestling into like conditioning right after. Like there was a lot of practices where I was exhausted, and you know that's what they're gonna do to you at any college program, and you know I was really prepared for that.
Well, I actually remember one that was really hard for you. I think it was hard for you. But at that moment, it showed me who Adam really was going to be. There was a point in his career, Coach Sabellis, where I'm like, this kid is smart. He's picking up his technique. He's getting a lot better. But does he have it? You know, does he have that like killer instinct? Does he have it in him? And I don't know what happened. I was not very happy with practice. Something happened that it wasn't a good day for everybody. And I think we ended up doing like an I quit match of sorts. Like, you know, like you got to make your partner quit, and that's how practice is going to end. And at the time, I think Adam was becoming one of the better guys in the room. And me and Adam would wrestle at that time. And Adam couldn't take me down. His life depended on it at that time. By his senior year, he could. But I think this might have been 10th grade, you know, a little younger. Senior year, not too much. Don't get too confident. But we did an I quit match, and I went with him. And, you know, for the people listening, you know, Adam's my cousin, Adam's my family. So I probably was a little bit more violent with Adam than I would be with a regular high school kid, you know, being that we have some of the same DNA. And I remember in my head, you know, I wasn't going to take it to the fullest extent, but I was like, I'm going to work him this go. I want him to quit. I want to see if he could withstand this. And Coach Sabellis, when I tell you that I threw like the kitchen sink at him, I was mean. You know, I was very mean. I was really putting it on him. And he didn't quit. He didn't quit. He didn't quit to the point where it was getting me frustrated, you know, and I was like, how is this kid not quitting right now? I'm beating the living daylights out of him. And at that moment, I don't know if you remember this workout, Adam, but at that moment, I was like, Adam's got it. I'm not quite sure where this is going to take him, but he's got it. You know, do you remember that day a little bit, Adam?
Yeah, I do. I'm trying to remember how it ended. But we don't. Remember we how did it end?
What happened?
We don't have to say.
You don't have to say. Yeah, it might not look good on my end.
I definitely remember it being, you know, maybe like a 30-minute go or something like that, which is pretty long. So.
And you took it the whole time, and I think I told it in my interview, Coach Sabellis. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I told a story about John beating me up really bad for like an hour. It was kind of similar. I mean, I don't know if I took it to the extent that maybe he did in that workout, but I was putting it on him. And to see that he was able to like respond to that, I knew that he was a different breed. You know, there's people that wrestle as a sport. I won't say as a hobby. I don't think anybody really wrestles as a hobby because it's a little bit too tough. But you wrestle as a sport or you wrestle for a lifestyle, you know. And I think at that point I knew that was Adam's lifestyle. Like he was in. He was fully in. You know, so I remember that. And I think you can't fake things like that. And again, Coach Sabellis, I think that goes back to what we were talking about when people get upset after their matches. You can't fake it. Like we know if you're in this or you're not in this and what you're capable of. And to me, as a 10th grader, Adam showing up in that workout and doing his thing, not only did I know he was going to be a successful wrestler on this level and the next level, I'm not worried about Adam outside of wrestling because he has that work ethic where, hey, stuff gets hard, I'm going to figure it out. Adam, would you say like, you know, you can take that workout out, but wrestling itself, when you put yourself in those deep, deep waters, those deep, dark waters, do you think that's almost like a metaphor for life where you can kind of figure out, hey, I've been in these positions. I can get out of a lot now.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think you could think of it in like a short time frame like that. Like if it's just like a 30-minute go in practice where you see yourself, you know, even if you don't succeed, but, you know, survive kind of, or like I was talking about with my junior year, like dislocating my elbow and then, being able to come back kind of strong. So I think there's a lot of ways that wrestling can show you how to succeed that maybe other sports do, but I don't know. I don't think it might not be as taxing as wrestling.
It's different. Coach, so when Adam was in high school, you obviously followed his career. Was there a moment for you that you were like, this kid's legit, that you saw him wrestling and you're like, because you knew him as my little cousin, we followed him through
He
youth.
was always around. He was one of the guys. I mean, he was
always
around.
there. Was there something that stood out to you with him that I don't know.
Eastern States, when he won Eastern States, one of the toughest tournaments in the country, I was at Hen Hud watching the wrestlebacks, and you called me and you said Adam won the tournament.
He didn't just win it too. He dominated. He dominated the whole entire tournament, which was
great. I wish I was there for that because we never had an Eastern States champion.
The only person I've cornered to win the Eastern States title at this point. I mean, I've had some club guys that have won, but I was in Adam's corner that weekend. Jacob took second, Aaron took second, Shriver was a couple time placer. But Adam winning it was pretty cool and in dominant fashion.
Yeah.
That was fun. And like you said, Adam, who knows if that came back to bite us a little bit at States when you wrestled the kid from Minnesink in the semis. He might have knew your game plan a little bit. I think a little bit that was more maturity again and pressure kind of getting to you. I think you were still 5 times better than that kid at that moment. I think it was a questionable call with the feet in the mat, but it shouldn't have been that close in the first place. I mean, if we're going to call it what it is, but you matured, you figured it out. There's 2 more things I want to touch on before we wrap up. One is the relationship with your dad with wrestling, because your dad was there for a lot. Your dad is not a typical wrestling guy. As much as I love Paul, like wrestling is not his, domain, but he was there. He barely, to this moment, he doesn't really miss shit. He loves it. And my dad's relationship with you, so maybe talk about, outside support outside of Coach Sabellas, myself, and John, your coach at Fordham Prep, your dad, my dad, like feeling that people were really, pushing you in the right direction. How was that for you?
Yeah. So my dad, I was going to say this a little bit earlier, but like I said, like when I was in like 5th grade and 6th grade and it was tough coming to club practice and getting beat up and whatnot. There were a couple of times I wanted to quit, but I mean, my dad is not like my dad never wrestled. He's not like a hard wrestling dad. He didn't, push me past really anything, to any like breaking points or whatnot. But I do remember being in like 5th and 6th grade and like complaining that I didn't want to go to practice and at that point he did push me to stick with it, and I'm really happy he did, because I mean maybe if I quit I would have quit for good and maybe never picked it back up again. But so he pushed me through that, and I mean over the years he is also, I think, grown to like wrestling, and like I said, like he's never wrestled before, so he doesn't know much technical wise or whatnot, but
he's getting there.
Yeah, he's getting there, but he can pick up on like mental cues and stuff like that, and see
Sure.
like after a match maybe I didn't look good, he'll say to me like, oh, like, well, you didn't seem like yourself today, something like that. But he's very supportive, comes to most every match, and I think he's really grown to love it. And then my relationship with your dad. So did your dad wrestle at all in high school? No, right?
Just on the streets.
Yeah, just on the streets. So yeah. Yeah, but
Allegedly.
Prove it.
So always I always thought like my dad like didn't know anything about wrestling, and he didn't, if we're being honest. So I'd be like, Dad, like like you don't know anything about wrestling. But even though your dad never wrestled, I never really kind of like gave him that attitude ever, or felt like that way about him, because I know like he had been through it with you.
Yeah, it's his second time, right? It's second time around.
So I always respect him in that way, and it is funny to have him corner you I remember when we were a little bit older and I was in high school and we went to like the Pin Cancer Nationals, or maybe even he came with us to the Northeast
He
Regionals
was
too.
there. He drove us. Yeah, he was there.
Yeah.
I was stuck on a bus.
D took the bus. He had a bus of kids. Yeah. What a good guy D is, though.
Yeah. But
hey, wait, before you go any further in that story, what place did I take at Pink Cancer? Don't play with me. Don't play with me. Champ. Two-time Pink Cancer national champ. Two-time Pink Cancer catch. Blah, 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 champ.
Right.
Right.
Beat that 84-year-old, remember?
74.
USA.
Oh my God! If Pete Duke watches this, I know you started that chant. I'm still coming for you, and I'll never forget that. But yeah, so it was cool. You know what? For me, Coach and Adam, it was cool to see my dad kind of be as invested in Adam and see that he still kind of had something that he loved. Like, cause I was done with college wrestling at that point. I knew how much my dad loved wrestling, and it was kind of cool to see him get to do it another time with Adam, and he cared just as much. You know, it was really, really cool to watch Adam at States. And Paul, of course, loves Adam more than anything. That's his son. But I think, you know, my dad with Paul kind of helped Paul fall in love with the sport as well. You know, it was kind of like it was a family thing, really. Like, I was always close to Adam, but when he became a wrestler, we became a lot closer. Like, I was his sponsor at his confirmation, like things like that. I'm surprised they even let me in the church, but things like that happened, you know. And I think wrestling's that type of sport when you kind of go through the trenches with each other, you figure it's a different connection because it's different than what other people need to deal with, if that makes sense. But real quick, Adam, before we wrap up, you know, tell us a little bit maybe about your college experience, because I didn't get to really touch on it too much with Matt. I don't want to keep these going too long like we did with some of the other ones, so people actually hopefully watch them all the way through. But you're at an Ivy League school. So obviously that's very impressive. You were a good student in high school, but I think wrestling probably helped you get into this Ivy League school too. So it was a two-way street. But you still have the academic requirements while you're at a school like this, and you're with a bunch of students, and Cornell's a great team. So you have to, there's a couple caveats there, right? You have the Ivy League school, the academics that you have to keep up with your schoolwork. You're in a room with a bunch of hammers like guys like Yanni who are unbelievable. How do you make it all work? How do you kind of like, have time to do everything, like time management pretty much?
Yeah. It's tough, but I mean, it's doable. If you asked me in high school if I thought I would be able to go to an Ivy League school and wrestle for a team like Cornell, I probably would have said yes, but I would have had some doubts, and I definitely did coming out of high school, but it's definitely doable, especially if you're coming out of good clubs like Empire and getting trained by Anthony, and it's doable, and it's tough, but I mean, like you said, like everybody on the team is going through it. School's tough for everyone. Wrestling's tough for everyone. We're all going through it. So we have a really great team dynamic there, and same deal as with high school. We all joke around, mess around, and have a lot of fun. But we make sure to get our work in. And
it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see, and I really think that the sky's the limit for you there. We'll wrap this up, but Coach, I'll let Coach Sabalas say your thing. I'll say a thing, and then Adam, you'll have the last words. Coach, what's your last thing you got for this man before we wrap this up?
The greatest of luck, and I know you're going to work extremely hard to reach your goals, and we hope you reach them. And we'll be up there to watch you whenever we're around. So
yeah,
might have more time this year than last. So we'll be taking some road trips. See you.
It might be either way, right? If college season gets cut in half, maybe we'll get Adam down here for some clinics or something like that. But
it's another thing. He helped our guys a ton.
You
helped us really build Jacob.
Like I was gonna say, a guy like Jacob Ferreira probably jumped levels just watching a guy like Adam in the room. He definitely, as much as we wish that you were wrestling for really Adam, I still really think you kind of did, and you have a lot more to do with the groundwork of this program than you probably understand. But for me, I'll say, and don't get all like emotional or weird or anything, because I'll smack you through the computer. But we're very proud of you. And I really hope, like I said, a lot of our kids listen to this and understand that Adam really, and this is not me even being funny at this point, when he first started wrestling, it was not for him right off the bat, right? He figured it out. He worked really hard. He believed in himself. Other people believed in him as well, me, my dad, his dad, and John and stuff. But he had to believe in himself. It couldn't be just us, and he did, and he figured it out. I think when it comes to college wrestling, he's been in there with top 5 guys in the country. You know, he had Quincy Monday beat this year in the dual meet. You don't want to hang your hat on a loss, but he was right there. I feel like if Adam has that same confidence we always talked about with him in high school, he could be an NCAA champ. He could be an All-American. He is that guy. He obviously has the technique and the skill and the heart. I think just a little bit more belief might put him right over the top there. So we're very excited to see how this season goes. Hopefully there is a season. I think there will be, at least for college. Very excited. Hopefully maybe he'll get another year, depending on what happens with all this other stuff that's going on here. But can't wait. We're proud of you. We love you. But don't ever repeat that I said that in public. You know, and that's pretty much it. Adam, you got the last words. Go ahead, buddy, and then we'll wrap this sucker up.
Yeah. I'm excited to see how this year plays out. Excited to get wrestling again, and thank you guys for having me.
All right, awesome. So hang on for a second. I'm gonna stop recording it. But this is episode 36. We got some big ones coming up next week.